We want to thank everybody who is joining us here. It's a maiden voyage for the OMHA, and it's exciting to use the new technology to make this announcement today. I'm Dan Pollard. Worked in hockey and the media for a number of years. I'm not going to tell you how many because let's put it this way, I don't have the makeup on. I'm sure you can figure that out by now. But CBC and also the NHL Network for a number of years. And most exciting for me was being president of a minor hockey association for 4 years and being involved in minor hockey for so many years. Literally, the game has changed from the time when I was president of a minor hockey association and continues to change. And this is exciting news. The OMHA, in partnership with Hockey Canada and the Ontario Hockey Federation, formally announcing a transformation in programming, which includes the implementation of a cross-ice and half-ice game rollout through the 2019-2020 season for novice and below players. And we have three special guests here to help answer some of the questions that may come up today, and also just give their statements. Ian Taylor, the Ontario Minor Hockey Association Executive Director, joining me here at our table. And we also have online Paul Carson, Hockey Canada Vice President of Hockey Development, and Phil McKee, Ontario Hockey Federation Executive Director as well. So what we're going to do is we'll try to keep this as informal as possible. We do have a spot for question and answers, and you'll notice there is a button there. We'll get to that a little later on. We'll open up some questions for you, and I'll let you know when you can put those questions in queue. But what I'd like to do to start things off is actually get some opening comments. And I'd like to start with Ian Taylor, Ontario Minor Hockey Association Executive Director. So Ian, an exciting day.
Yeah, very exciting. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for hosting this for us. It is an exciting day, and I want to thank Paul and Phil for joining us as well. These guys are leaders in our sport and have been a huge help to the OMHA in putting together the program we want to lay out for players 8 and under moving forward. So it really is an exciting day. You know, clearly we're all passionate about hockey and about the sport. And as you said, change isn't always easy. Sometimes it can be difficult, but I think some of the changes that we're bringing forward are going to make a huge impact to our entry-level players, both from a development standpoint, but also from simply a way to introduce players to the game and keep players in the game. So giving them that right start, that's a huge part of this. And again, really excited where this is going to go. And again, Paul and Phil, the work they've put in, the OHF and Hockey Canada, just really good and really good to work together. And we know this is a national plan, but also a plan we want to that is being implemented across the province.
Right.
And yeah, it's good. It's good. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Well, and that's the thing, is we will continue to flesh out some of the details, but we wanted to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to speak. We've got Paul Carson back on. Paul, if you can give just some opening comments about what is obviously a very exciting day. And again, Paul is the Vice President at Hockey Canada of Hockey Development.
Sorry, you lost me. That's technology for you, but glad to be back. I'm really thrilled to be a part of today's proceedings with the OMHA and the OHF. Worked closely with Phil and with Ian, not to mention all of the member branches across the country on this initiative. And we've worked on it for a few years, and to get to places today where we can talk about the benefits to youngsters, I can't be more thrilled than being able to get into this environment and talk about both the philosophical and educational application of, why this is important to grassroots hockey in Canada, and why, as leaders in the game around the world, why others have looked at this model and incorporated it into their program development based on the leadership of Hockey Canada. So it's not a surprise that we ourselves feel compelled to really look at a different way to deliver the game at younger age levels. And I'm excited to be a part of this. as I said, being here today to be able to talk through a number of the reasons why we're making this change allows us to really be as transparent as possible and provide clarity to families that are not only in the game today, but new families that are registering their youngsters and want to know that the development experiences that their youngsters will have are the best they can be. So thanks very much for the opportunity today.
Okay, and we'll get back to you. We've got some questions coming your way in a short time, but let's hear from Phil McKee, Ontario Hockey Federation Executive Director as well. Phil.
Thank you to Ian and the OMHA, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this call. To Paul, I look forward for you giving us the facts and the information that you have the background on. It's always a pleasure to work with Ian and Paul, both development-minded individuals who have done a great deal for this game and brought it along, and have the background of where this comes from. From the OHF, our goal continues to be to work with Hockey Canada, our member, the OMHA, and the rest of the members in the OHF, along with the associations, in a collaborative approach to try to implement this and work with you and support you in that implementation. Going through this, we're all stakeholders in this game, and we all have a job to service the customer, and that's the player and the parent, and they're choosing to participate in our game. And for us, it's our responsibility to work collectively together, you as associations, the OMHA, Hockey Canada, ourselves, to deliver the tools to you to be able to prepare for the implementation of this cross-ice and half-ice game before the 18-19 and 19-20 season. The big key on this is that is collaboration and flexibility. And as we move forward, we're going to have to, collectively work together, but secondly, also be flexible in our implementation and our understanding of how we implement this, and continue to modify it as we continue to go forward to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our associations and our teams and players.
Super. Thanks, Phil. Sorry, I stepped on you there for a bit.
No worries. No worries.
It is the technology, so we do have a wee bit of a delay. But again, we will open up for questions and answers. But I wanted to kick off with a few questions. And I guess the simplest one, Ian, is to ask, why is this so important?
Yeah, it's a great question, and simply, and it's a simple answer, really. We want to give the right start to our beginner or introductory hockey players. So giving them that right start in terms of the ability to enjoy the game. So if they learn skills, if they have some success, if they improve, they're going to be engaged, they're going to enjoy the sport, and they're going to keep playing the sport. And I think that's really the foundation of all other hockey. This is our starting point. So,
but that's not to say you were wrong before.
Oh, you know what? I think what's interesting about this, and Paul alluded a little bit to this, is that while part of this program is new, the other part in terms of focus on skill development, station-based practices, small area games, this has been in place. Hockey Canada developed the initiation program more than 25 years ago. So that part of the program and that focus, there hasn't been a change. I think the area that we're looking at is modifying the game environment, scaling it to the size of the participants, just like smaller desks in school. We'll have a smaller playing environment. We've seen other sports incorporate this, soccer, tennis, basketball. And so that part of it is one part has been involved for a long time or engaged for a long time. And we're changing this again, the game side of it.
Right. Well, Paul, let me ask you then, is this in many ways working off the building blocks that have been in place, and this is just the expansion of a number of ideas?
No question. I think I appreciate that Ian brought back the fact that, in 1986, we rolled out the initiation program for ages 6 to 9. We went through an age change a number of years ago, and the initiation novice age groups have changed to 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. And through all of that, we've always recommended that shared practices, station-based teaching, and small area games should be the focus for skill development. And so It's pretty exciting to be here today to talk about something that, while some would say, is it really necessary to mandate it? The reality is, yeah, it's important to put this kind of principle in play for hockey right across the country, and for all of our partners and all of our stakeholders to know that this is a consistent approach right across the country, and that all players will benefit from a development approach that really looks at their needs as opposed to the needs of the game and having youngsters fit into what the adult game should look like.
Well, this is a transition, so it doesn't happen tomorrow. How is it going to roll out?
Well, in terms of what we're doing in the OMHA, and it's a fairly consistent approach across the OHF, and I'll let Phil speak to that a little bit. But as far as our approach this past season, we introduced cross ice hockey as the game format for players six years of age, initiation age group. This coming season, we'll incorporate half ice hockey at the 7-year-old age group. We call that tyke in the OMHA. And for the 1920 season, we'll continue the half ice model, half ice game model, transitioning after into the new year after January 15th to a full ice model. So what you'll see over that 3-year period is the transition from cross ice to half ice, and then to full ice. So then going into the minor atom age, or year, that would be full ice hockey as we know it now.
And you were talking about the transition for the OHF. So Phil, if you can address that from your perspective as well.
Yeah, I mean, the chart that's on the screen there that was up there is pretty much the same process that's going through. The only difference that wasn't outlined there is mixed programming 7 and 8 years of age. And that is, specifically in Northern Ontario, they're implementing that right now because most of their program is 7 and 8 years of age, small centers, mixed programming. They will implement for 8-year-olds the the half ice, and then full ice transition, similar to what's listed for the novice 8-year-olds there on that chart. So other than that, everyone is bought in. Everyone's working together on the implementation, and they're prepared for the 18-19 transition for 7-year-olds, and then ultimately the 19-20 transition for the 8-year-old players. And that was something that, we worked with Hockey Canada on to make sure that we had the transitionary plan over a course of a 2-year period versus having to implement it this year for 8 years of age and under.
Yeah, so there are no players that are going so-called backwards or changing their game. It's all moving forward.
It's moving forward. I think it was really important to all of us that this was a transition, a progression. I think that's really important. And specific to Phil and the role of the OHF, I commend those guys on the consistency. It's hard, and Paul deals with this too. The one size fits all is tough in a country as big as us, and we have in Ontario, again, big, small, rural, urban. So as Phil mentioned earlier, there's some flexibility. This is a framework. I know that's a term Paul uses a lot, which I really like. There's a framework to this model that'll allow it to work in those different scenarios. And again, my comment to Phil is just creating consistency in the OHF. That's a big deal when you have a lot of minor hockey groups all delivering programming.
How do you see its importance in developing the game?
Well, I'd throw that one to Paul. I'm interested in what he would have to say.
Thanks, Ian. And I think that's the heart of the question. How important is this to developing the game? How important is this to developing youngsters that will play the game, we hope, for life? I look at it in 3 veins. I want to bring kids to the game. I want kids to enjoy and develop in the game, and I want kids to stay in the game. And I think we all feel that way. I think that, Hockey Canada and its member partners, all the way down to minor hockey associations, really believe in what hockey has to offer. And so it's important that we're creating a game that is specific to the needs of youngsters. And, somebody said to me, what does age appropriate mean? Why is it important that we look at a game that is designed around the needs of the 8-year-old and under? And what I think is really important is we have to go into the educational world. And a lot of us come from that background of maybe being teachers or administrators in the school system, but we need to look at the physical, social, emotional, and cognitive development of youngsters. And most people will appreciate right away that 8 years old and under is very different than the next age group up, an age group up from that, and from adults. And if you recognize those differences and the needs to structure programming based on what those youngsters can handle, then you start to understand why modifications need to take place. This happens in every environment in life. Kids ride smaller bikes when they're younger. Kids are sitting in smaller desks when they're in elementary school. Kids are playing in a smaller gym. They're using smaller balls. They're using smaller court sizes. And then all of a sudden we come to a sport like hockey that we're traditionalists in, and we believe that that's the way the game's played on the full ice. And we then depart from what we just talked about. And philosophically, wanting to separate kids from the adult game is what we need to work on. And yet, as much as people will agree with the needs to meet their social, emotional, and cognitive developmental areas, we then leave and all of a sudden come back to, well, wait a minute, the game looks like this. And so what we've tried to do is structure the game in a way that by shrinking the space, we've given kids the opportunity to play in an area that's more conducive to developing skills at their level. I think we've achieved that.
Can I pick up Paul too? We're not just talking rep hockey here either. You talked about the keeping kids involved in hockey throughout their lives. So because I think we do tend to get caught up in the fact that we're looking at trying to create the next NHLer. That's not what this is about.
Good players will benefit from a system like this as much as the new players into the game. The challenges that we present for really good players need to be, they need to be at a level where that player is improving as well. And I just do not believe for a second that an environment that's more appropriate to the 8 and under player is going to be anything but beneficial to every skill level that's on the ice.
Right. Well, Ian, can you provide some of the basics?
Well, I think Paul's touched on a number of them, but when we look at what's specifically, taking the model or those fundamentals that Paul's talked about and bringing them to what's hockey going to look like? What's my child? What's the programming my child's going to participate in? And again, the area where our focus has been already is that these kids need to fundamental skills, technical skills, skating, puck control, passing, receiving, shooting. This is the foundation. And to your point about whether it's a recreational player or a rep player or, again, a program of excellence player, this is the foundation. It all starts here. So again, the program is designed again to give that foundation. Going into the game model, we're looking for, again, players to be engaged. So more touches of the puck, not simply one player being able to get, around the group,
some space,
and can skate, the length of the ice. And that's the number one skill involved. So what we're looking at is, again, the ability to turn, handle the puck in traffic. There's an element of competitiveness, which is good. So again, I think that's at the core of this program. Focus on technical skills, the players engaged. If the players engaged, they're going to improve. They're going to love the game. They love the game. They keep playing.
Have we just brought pond hockey indoors with some structure in learning the game that the way many learned in small ice situations on a pond over the years?
Well, I've heard pond hockey and road hockey, and again, the idea of that of free play, of open play, of again less time getting set up, more time, again, being engaged, touching the puck. I think that will benefit everyone.
So, and I would think if you were a parent, that's what you want for your youngster getting involved in a sport.
I mean, I would certainly, from me as a parent, that's true. Again, we all want our kids to have a good experience. So if they don't have a good experience, they'll find something else. There's lots of other options out there. I know as we introduced this year, the cross ice for 6-year-olds. I know Phil has talked to a lot of parents. We've had a lot of feedback, so I'm also interested in his comments there.
Oh, we may have lost his audio there.
No, I'm here.
There he is. There you are.
Yeah, talking with tons of parents and going through this, the answer has been it's about fun. The kids, re-engage. It's about non-restrictive play, like that structure of everything has to be structured in my kid's life. I get back to the game. I get to actually just play. They go on the ice. They have fun. They come off with a smile on their face, and it's the parents and us as adults that have the trouble of not seeing the 85 by 200 ice when the kid's on the ice playing cross ice or half ice. And I'm a parent of a 5-year-old who's going into this program. Can't be more excited than I am with the transition, and that he'll see the game all the way through at this level going moving forward. But parents should be happy that we're focusing back on fun. We've made decisions based on as Paul talked about, education and the tools from education. And we haven't made this as an individual group. We've made this along with other sports. This is something that came from Sport Canada a number of years ago with their long-term athlete development. And it really sets out that 4 to 9 years of age development process that they'll get to experience, which is active start and fundamentals. And it's refocusing back on that, which is going to make kids want to stay in the game longer and enjoy the game longer.
Phil mentioned something interesting in that other sports have adapted over the years. So this is an adaptation at the hockey level. So are you able to glean any statistical information that this indeed helps improve the young athletes?
Absolutely. And we've got a slide as far as some of the research that's gone on, and I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but simply in this model, we're looking at things: more puck touches, more passes, more shots. Overall, you can see the engagement is certainly increased, and that's for all players. So again, scaling the environment to the size of the players, we're looking at I guess the perfect model or ideal model being a 4-on-4. We're not concerned with icings, offsides. So the players can, again, be involved.
Be creative.
Be creative. Again, as the numbers suggest, be more engaged. And again, not, I'll use the offside example. And the offside example is, how do we teach our kids offside? There's plenty of time to do that. Let's teach them how to handle the puck. Let's teach them how to support. Let's teach them how to give and go, all the good stuff that we want to talk about, and be part of our game. Teaching offside, that's the easier one. We can do that at any time.
Right. Paul, let me ask you, as far as a model is concerned, does this follow what USA Hockey has been doing for a number of years?
USA Hockey introduced this level of play about 3 years ago, and I would suggest that what we've tried to do is to accomplish a little bit more in terms of a framework around how all of our partners across the country will deliver the game. So yes, did USA Hockey make a switch to half ice hockey and cross ice hockey? Absolutely. Interestingly enough, I would say that as I did my inventory across Canada, there were a number of pockets in the country that had already made that move as well. I can tell you from my experience as a youngster playing the game when I was 6 and 7 years old, I played cross ice hockey in a regular sized arena. My son, who's now 30, he played in small space games, half ice hockey at the novice level when we were in Vancouver. So, it's been a part of hockey all the way along, and it's been a part of many minor hockey associations throughout the country. Now we're just formalizing the process. So, others have borrowed from what we were able to achieve early on in building the framework. Now we're putting that framework in place in a consistent manner across the country. And I like the fact that Ian brought up the graphic that showed the benefits. I'll give you a couple more, but just before I do that, so that analysis was done by the NHL in Detroit, working with USA Hockey. And when you take into account the fact that we can actually put markers on youngsters, send them out on the ice, and we can analyze all of their behavior into quantifiable statistics, then these statistics tell us that the advantages are we increase time on task, we increase repetition, and we increase the quality of experiences in that half ice environment. Hockey Alberta did a skating study. They did the same thing. They take a look at what it means to skate the full ice versus what it means to skate in smaller spaces like cross ice and half ice. So you've got 10% skating acceleration increasing. That's what the study determined, was that actually kids were moving much quicker because they found they had a closer proximity to the puck and they were more engaged. Eventually kids stopped skating when dominant players control the puck on full ice. So, we know that research exists like that. And then we can go all the way back to George Kingston studying the European game in the late 70s, early 80s, where it was determined that through small space offerings, through multiple practices, an increased number of practices, youngsters were having the opportunity to develop their skills at a higher level as individual players. So we're excited about how this model will bring that together through the research that's available. And one slide that I sent to Ian yesterday was from a presentation that USA Youth Soccer did. And that was back in 2013. And they took information from Hockey Canada and inserted it into their presentation as they were rationalizing why they were going to small-sided play in soccer.
Yeah, Paul, I'm glad you brought up the Hockey Alberta study as well, because that's one we've looked to as an area that we can point out to parents. We've used that quite a bit about how much space it takes to get to full speed. That was a question parents had, and I find it, and the comment coming back, or the findings coming back, was they could reach top speed within 65 feet. Half ice or cross ice is 85 feet. So that was just a great opportunity to answer specifically on that type of question. And I find it interesting, if we are talking about elite players, which parents will want to know, we're talking about players who play a 10-foot game. They're going to win that puck in that 10-foot area around them. So that's where players have to be, quick, skilled, and again, as Paul says, if the players are closer to the play, they're more engaged in the play. They're more apt to be, using their skating skills, using their puck control skills. So we can go both ways. We can talk about the entry level player and engagement, but if you do want to talk about the high end player, it's the same skills.
No one's losing.
No, it's building. It's the foundation again.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that one piece was puck movement and availability drives the speed of play, and young players want to get the puck. And the observations in the Alberta study showed that players believed they had a better opportunity to get the puck when playing on half ice. And so the speed of the game actually goes up.
Right.
Why novice and below? Was it a tipping point? I'll open up with Ian, and maybe we can follow up.
I guess it's, in terms of a tipping point. I'm not sure that that's the point, but there is a window. Again, Phil alluded to that player, 5 to 8 years old, as an area of active start in sport. So we're talking about movement skills, and that can be hockey skills, jumping, running. So we've got that part of the physical literacy part of movement. And then we've got fundamentals and introducing those basic skills, technical skills of the game. So that's a window that again, if players can have some success, learning skills, I've improved. If I've improved, I like playing, and I'll keep playing. So that is, part of the long-term player development model that Phil mentioned earlier. And so certainly that's that window or opportunity to, to introduce the game in that area.
Right. And started off on the right foot, so to speak.
One of the points we like to say is, it's a right start. It's the right start for these players.
We're going to open up questions now to folks on the webinar. And our first question from a guest is, how long will full implementation take?
Well, the model or the window that we've introduced is going to be a 3-year window. Hockey Canada has introduced 2019-20 as being implemented across the country. What we've done here in Ontario and with the OHF has been to implement it over a 3-year window. This current season for 6-year-olds for cross ice, coming season 18-19, 7-year-olds half ice, and then full implementation by 19-20 with that transition year. Phil, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think we're going to continue that implementation probably in the 2021 season, with the aspect of, continuing to evaluate that implementation. And if there has to be any small modifications to that, to meet our game, meet our requirements of our customers and our players. So it's going to be a continuation of that. And, we'll probably be looking at other levels of hockey as we continue through here, and a continuation for these players as they move into Adam, Pee Wee, and into Bantam hockey.
For those who are on the webinar and are looking to ask a question and look for an answer, there is a Q&A button, and just hit that, and that will put you in the queue. We do have an audio question from Sean Fitzgerald. Hi, Sean. How are you? From The Athletic. So, Sean, if you can fire off your question.
Yeah. Hey, fellas. Thanks for doing this. I am in Toronto, so obviously this is going to be the most obnoxious question you're going to field, but I'm wondering what kind of sense you've got for folks who are looking to leave and go to some of these, I guess, quote unquote, renegade full ice leagues. Is that something that you see as potentially a problem?
So-called rebel leagues.
Yeah, understanding there's programming outside of Hockey Canada. Our belief is this is what's best for kids. And again, as Paul noted, our goal is to introduce the sport and have people engage in the sport for life. So again, overall, we believe this is what's best for our kids. I don't know, guys, if you want to add something to that.
I think that, the pudding is kind of in proof in the fact that we have, one of the largest unsanctioned groups, just came on board and want to partake in this program. They want to be part of it. And for the 18-19 season, some of those outside groups are not going to be outside anymore. They'll be part of Hockey Canada's programming and running the half ice program because, one, they like it for the development aspect, and two, people who run rinks, it's more cost effective to put 34 kids on the ice versus putting 10 or 11 kids on the ice. And so in the end, you have a small group that have an interest to, maybe play full ice because they can't get the concept of, what half ice or cross ice brings to the players. But, speaking with the GTHL and their internal groups, their house leagues are excited for the opportunity to actually go to the half ice. And that implementation, a lot of them are looking forward to it at the select level that they have down in the GTHL for that specific purpose. So I think the movement out is a small group of people who have a specific interest of their own child, their own mindset that you can't be a hockey player unless you play full ice. And the end result is every hockey player is playing cross ice or half ice, even at the National Hockey League level, because that's where the game's at.
Sean, does that answer the question?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up, if I might, for Mr. McKee. What's the unsanctioned group that's moving into under the umbrella?
The group out of Burlington, the Wave, Burlington Cougars group, have joined and made the direction to move with the Alliance for the 2018-19 season, and so that's about 1,000 players that will come in under Hockey Canada that were outside of that our program, but will now be benefiting from Hockey Canada programming, and specifically the 8 and under programming.
Ian, you wanted to add something?
Sorry, Paul, go ahead.
I just want to ask Mr. Carson, is this the noise, the protest, because it has been rolled out across Canada, is Toronto a special case? Just like, are we whinier here in Toronto than anywhere else in Canada?
No, I wouldn't say that, Sean. I feel that, first off, Hockey Canada recognizes that more than 25% or more than a quarter of the population playing hockey in Canada is in Ontario. And there are some very, very large pockets of programming. And so the real challenge is, as Phil alluded to earlier, and what this webinar is all about is getting the right messaging out and supporting parents with the information that helps them make good decisions. And I think because hockey sort of moves in a traditional manner, we have 2 choices. We have a choice to continue to do what we do because we always have done it that way, or we can investigate what's the best opportunity for youngsters and move the game forward. And that's what makes it difficult in Southern Ontario, is just, it's the sheer volume of making sure that messaging gets out there. So I wouldn't suggest that it's anything negative, Sean. I think it's just the challenge of the size of the population in the Greater Toronto area.
Before we go, Sean, Ian wants to say something too.
Yeah, Paul, just to add on to that, I think one of the things that we've identified after this first year of the cross ice at 6-year-old moving forward is, sometimes people think this is kind of pie in the sky, right? That it's perfect world, everyone will develop but this is part of the framework we've got to create. So one of the big questions we've had, coming into us over the past year is tiering of players. So the ability of like skill to play against like skill. It doesn't make sense to have a kid who's been playing for a couple of seasons, perhaps playing against a player that has just started. Now, in some situations, that numbers may dictate that's the case, but that's an area that I think we can address within programming to again, competition is okay, competition is good, and again, putting like players against like players should be something that we endeavor to do within our programming. And that's where some of the flexibility that Phil talked about and also that Paul mentioned within the scope of that framework. So we've got to find ways to ensure that we can do that. And I think that may address the part of the question Sean has too, with again, the ability to put like with like. That's also going to ensure that player who's just starting out gets to touch the puck. Right. So again, scale the environment, but also put them in a situation with similarly skilled players.
Sean, any follow-ups from that?
I don't want to monopolize this whole webinar, though I could. I can step aside and put my hand
I know
up.
what reporters are like, so believe me, being one myself.
All right, a quick one then for all 3 fellows. What have you? I mean, I've been in the room with Mr. McKee a lot when he's fielded a lot of questions. What has been maybe your most gratifying interaction with a parent who started off very much against this concept, but sort of had their sort of finding religion about cross ice? What's been the most gratifying part for you? Or has there been an interaction where you're like, I hated cross ice, but you know what? I see the benefit of it.
Well, for me, and speaking through that, there definitely was a mother who was at one of the sessions and sat through a conversation, and her husband was someone who came into the game and was part of the game, and he believed fully in cross ice and half ice. And she had 3 boys, 2 that had already gone through the system and 1 that was going through this age group, and she was adamantly against it. And it was after she did the research that this parent had called in and asked the questions, came back, and it's like, this is the direction we need to be going. and so strongly believed in it that at a parent session, with all the negativity of this isn't the direction to go with, because they thought we were holding back a subset of elite supposedly players, which at this level they just are further along the development stream. She was the one who stood up and spoke and said, this is the direction we need to go. She was defending the situation and allowing me in a situation not to have to speak. So it was very gratifying to see that situation where parents who actually have researched, identified it, they're speaking out on our behalf and with us in support of the implementation that we're going forward with.
I think, Sean, from my perspective, it's been watching the evolution of the parent that Phil just talked about. I had the opportunity to be up in Prince George or Dawson Creek, BC, about 3 years ago, and then I was just there again in the fall, and I traveled from Dawson Creek to Fort St. John to see a novice half-ice jamboree for the full day. And the excitement and the enthusiasm in the building as this switch has taken place in those northern communities. And it's because of program champions. When you understand the benefits and you start to advocate for the shift to the game in this direction, you become a program champion as well. And they're very important people in the process because they really help to calm the waters a little bit and ask others for some time to watch this process evolve, to watch this process grow. And then you get into communities where eventually they don't know a different model. This is the model their children were introduced to. This is the model their children are growing up through. And when we get to that place in a number of communities, people may say, hey, not really sure what all the fuss was about initially, but that's what change is about. And we need program champions that provide us with the support.
Well, Sean, stay online. We do have a written in question which may tie in.
I'm just going to add one thing to what Paul said. And Paul, when he was at that last event, he sent me a couple of texts with pictures from that jamboree, and Paul sent me the pictures of the 6 and 7 year olds playing cross ice, and then he had sent me a picture. This was also at the time of the
World Under 17,
the World Under 17 Challenge, and he's showing me the teams there to end practice are playing, guess what, cross ice games. So that was pretty cool too, to show in the same community, the same environment, you had entry-level players with, these under 17 players, program of excellence players, engaged in the same.
What do NHL players do?
Exactly. And I know that's not the way, I would say that we've endeavored to sell this program.
No.
But it made enough of an impact on Paul that he sent me those texts and that I'm talking about it today. So,
Sean, thanks for the questions. We do have one last question that's been written in, and it talks about specific format changes, because obviously you've got to deal. It's a different situation dealing with benches, a number of kids on the ice, and referees. What will this look like?
We again through the leadership of Hockey Canada, we've been given some framework, some guidelines to work under. One of the comments or one of our calls that we had, I know there was areas that we called were non-negotiables and negotiables, and so some of the non-negotiables was, again, what the size of the ice surface is going to be. Some of the negotiables would be, do we have one official or two officials on the ice, be it cross ice or half ice? So that's certainly one area. Another key area, and we talked about the pond hockey or road hockey type of format, is not having a lot of whistles, maximizing, again, players engaged activity. So that's a big part of it. And you can see it. We've talked about, again, officials, face-offs, just having face-offs to start the period, having the puck back in play as quickly as possible, whether we have buzzer or again, shift lengths. we've got some flexibility there too.
Does it change in that novice year because half the year is played one way, half the is full
Correct.
ice?
Yeah.
So is there a transition there, or are they just going to be used to playing a certain way?
No, and that would give, so what we would have is half ice through the beginning of the season, through the first half of the season. Then there'd be a 2-week period essentially for preparation to the movement to full ice. And that could be maybe, again, scrimmage, informal games. And that's when you can introduce maybe some of the more of the regulation game rules.
Offsides.
That you would have that. But I'd like to ask Paul, Paul to explain the 2-team format, because I think that's a huge part of this in terms of we've had a lot of questions about now you have 4 teams going to a rink. There's not enough dressing rooms. This is going to put a huge stress on our facilities, on our schedulers. So I'd like to ask Paul to explain the 2-team model, because I think this is what is, it's a real simple part of this, but boy, I think it's going to make it really work well.
Well, thanks, Ian. So the term is two-team, 2-game model. 2 teams are going to show up at a designated ice time. The coaches will divide their teams in half. Half their team will play at one end of the ice. Half their team will play at the other end of the ice. Why this model can work so well is that if you take a 50-minute ice session, for example, we've broken down the statistics on a full ice game with face-offs, with penalty calls, with interruptions in the game, and 3 full lines going through the rotation. You're probably getting about 13 minutes of ice time maximum. And yet, what's up?
No, sorry. I'm
Okay.
pointing at Matt.
and when you go to the 4-on-4 model, half ice, now you have half your team at one end. So you're every second shift, your ice time actually doubles. Right. And it doubles because you're not blowing whistles, you're not stopping play, you're not reorganizing players. But that 2-team model, what is similar? One team is allocated an ice time. The other team is the visiting team. The ice time is the same, 50 minutes probably, or 60 minutes. If in the past you've assigned 2 referees to a game, you still assign 2 referees to a game. One referee does one half of the ice, one referee does the other half of the ice. The clock is set at a 25-minute half. You have 2 25-minute halves. Both teams play to the same clock. The clock just keeps running. At the end of the first half, the visiting team switches place. So now the visiting team plays against the other half of the home team. The only things that are really different are putting borders on the ice, having a second goaltender. So now you need to identify 2 goaltenders to play. And we don't advocate that kids are fixed to any position in the game at this age. So we'd like all kids to rotate through goaltending. And then in the case of some parts of the country, like the negotiables were, the OMHA and in the OHF using a blue puck at the 7-year-old level, using a black puck at the 8-year-old level. When Hockey Canada puts a framework in place, they try to put a standard in place that fits right across the country and then allows for some adjustment to take place. Rural communities might say they don't have enough players to actually build a 17 or 18 person roster and split it in half. They may just play one half of the ice, 4-on-4, and then the other half of the ice may be assigned to a third team that may have a practice ice session. So the 2-team, 2-game model doesn't really upset the apple cart. It's still 2 teams showing up for the facility, showing up to the facility, 2 teams requiring dressing rooms, 2 officials being assigned to the game. We've tried to be as least intrusive as possible in the existing model.
Right. And that's the beauty of it. It really is. So we're getting all the benefits. And as Paul says, without introducing a bunch of other changes. And again, we can focus on the areas that are going to benefit the players the most. It's great.
Let's get some final comments. And Phil, we haven't heard from you for a bit. So let's get your final comments on this announcement today.
Well, I mean, congratulations, OMHA, on taking the initiative to do this and to put this out to your associations. I see this as a couple fundamentals. One is fun, the refocus on fun for the player and for us as parents, that we don't have to look at it from this aspect of it has to be 85 by 200. It's all about competition, but rather looking at it as our kids out there having fun, enjoying the time they're participating in the game. Two is development, the development of those players and giving them that opportunity to develop and grow in their skills with like skilled players, as Ian talked about, tiering, making sure those players have a fun and meaningful experience on the ice. And one we haven't talked about is, maximizing that time in the game to the time on the ice. And so right now, if you take a normal novice game, you're about 18-1. So your time to be in the game, travel to the rink, to participate, to play, to the actual time that you're on the ice playing is about 18-1. And how do we narrow that gap, that ratio, and get as close to 1-to-1 as possible? And that will be something that you deal with regards to narrowing out your geography of where you play at this age group, maximizing, those times in the game that they're on the ice by having, smaller groups playing at either end of the ice. So really focusing on that, which can ultimately reduce the time and money that parents are putting in this game, and provide them the opportunity to enjoy the game longer on the same amount of dollars.
Phil, thanks for taking part today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Paul, we'll give you a last word here as well.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm quite humbled by the fact that I get invited to speak to groups about what I'm passionate about and about what all of us are passionate about, and that's the development of youngsters in the game today. I like that we talked about long-term player development. We talked about the fact that 8 and under is really around fundamental movement, physical literacy, and skill introduction. But even you asked earlier about what happens after novice. Well, in the 9 to 12-year-old age group, those are your optimal years for skill acquisition. So Phil didn't mention it earlier, but he also chairs a Canadian Development Model Group, something that is looking at all ages in our sport and looking at the continuum of development from the youngest player that enters the game, the younger girls and boys who enter the game, right through to midget and college and junior hockey. Like the whole model needs to really have some attention paid to it. But here we're focusing on what I believe to be the right start, as Ian put it. And I'll leave it with this: a competition model works counter to a sport development model. And we really need to set our sights on being a sport development model and put competition in the back seat and say, you know what, trophies and tournament wins and points on a scoreboard are not as important as the development opportunities we give youngsters to just enjoy the sport and discover as they go.
Thank you, Paul, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Ian, some last words?
Yeah, well, I want to thank Phil and Paul, and you, of course, for hosting. We love to talk about this stuff. This as Paul said, we have a passion for this. This is what drives us. And at the end of the day, we believe hockey is a great sport. We believe there's, sport benefits kids and our communities, and we want to be a part of that. And if I can get it down to just what Paul said, that pathway, it's just simply doing what's right for the player at the right time, right? And if we can do that, then, like we said, we'll have kids engaged, we'll have them enjoying the sport, benefiting from the sport, and we'll have lots of good people in our communities as well.
Well, and it's been very exciting to be part of the OMHA for the last few years, being part of the podcasts, and then again this foray into some video and using the internet and using computers and hooking people up and getting messages across about, as you said, a passion of a sport. So this presentation has been recorded, and we'll be sharing it online at omha.net later on today. If you have any specific questions, or maybe didn't get a chance to ask a question today, you can ask the questions about programming novice and below. Contact Joe Roma at media@omha.net. net. And we want to thank everyone for joining us here today for our inaugural. I think we might be back. Who knows? We'll just keep talking hockey. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks.